on computer. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 16th episode of Toast to Talk on the Toast Network. This is Vivek, your host. We had a brilliant weekend at Monaco. It is kind of like, if you're a cricketing fan, this is like the Lords of the F1 circuit. A rich, tapered history at Monaco over the years. And we had a lot of excitement thanks to Mother Nature, rain gods coming into play, strategies working for some, not working for the others, and a lot of excitement with respect to, we had a few crashes, fortunately, no injuries, at least no serious injuries, but we'll discuss all of that with our two panelists, one of them who's over the moon, but let's discuss more about that. Welcoming up front, Vignesh and Bharath. Welcome aboard, guys. One thing I'd ask each one of you is to start off with your highlight from the race weekend. And Bharath, if you want to start off.
The obvious highlight of this weekend is obviously Checo's win. And what a drive from that person. Checo thoroughly deserves that win, and that's the main highlight. And one more key thing to be noted is George Russell's consistency. He's still not out of P5. Only driver to finish in points in each and every race, which is a phenomenal feat, but in a new car. And that is also one more highlight. And
just to let our viewers know, right, the reason why Bharath says Checo's win is very important, obviously in the broader aspect of him winning for the first time, but also the fact that in the qualifying, Ferraris had the faster car, they were 1-2, and then Red Bull was 3-4. But the final outcome, the results that's there for everyone to see, where we have Red Bull 1 with Checo, Ferrari with Sainz, Max Verstappen at 3, and Charles Leclerc at 4. So in that context, it means a lot more for Checo to have been at the top. And as Bharat rightly pointed out, number 5 was a Mercedes car with George Russell, not Hamilton, but George Russell. And this brings up a very interesting point that we'll discuss a little later because we're still discussing the highlights of the race. So Bharat, go ahead.
So as we mentioned, George Russell finished P5. And one more highlight, I will not call it as a highlight, Ferrari's blunder pit strategy too. We can call that as also a highlight. They made obvious error, a very big error during the race. And we all know what kind of circuit is Monaco. It's a street circuit where the overtaking is very difficult. And people say that
unless you're pure starting,
yeah. So the win happens, like a person who takes pole position usually has a bigger chance to win because the overtaking is so difficult. But still, Perez had a brilliant drive, even after facing enormous pressure from Carlos Sainz at the behind for almost, I believe, 15 to 20 laps, I believe. So that much period, and still Perez withheld Carlos Sainz. So I'll call that as a big highlight. So.
Makes sense. We'll quickly switch over to Vignesh to see, what are your highlights for the weekend.
So I have 3 highlights. First, I'll go with Bharath. That is Perez's win. Phenomenal drive. Kudos to him. The second was a number of rain saves by the drivers. If you observe that, okay, a lot of drivers skid, but the way they ensured that, okay, they were not crashing into the barriers, like Guan Zhu, Sainz did it once. So those were one amazing. And thirdly, George Russell's consistency. P5, within P5 every race. Kudos to him. And of course, the circuit was difficult. After 2016, we have a rain this year. They were not ready for it. Qualifying was dry. The practice was dry. When the race comes, it was haywire. Yeah. So.
And it was heavy rainfall. We had the race red flagged. It started off late. And then finally it started off, and then they had to red flag it again. And there was a very interesting concept that happened in this race, right? Like, we didn't go with the total number of laps at the end of it. In the end, we had like 17 minutes left when they restarted the race, and they said, we're just going to race for 17 minutes. Do you want to give background to why would, like, what is this time format which is different from generally, like, if you look at a race, you look at the number of laps?
Yeah. So traditionally, F1 has raced around the circuits with a fixed number of laps. This ensures that okay, the teams are well prepared with their pit stop strategy and everything is systematically planned because based on the historical data, you know what to do and when. Now, with this unpredictability, considering the storm came in, there was a attempt to start it first, but then the storm was too big, so they had to red flag it. Then again, it was started. Then you had a series of crashes, and then again red flag, and again starting it. Now, this timing concept is nothing new to F1. So F1 has this time duration that okay, the race can only go for a specific length. If you exceed it, then it might be a problem. But yeah, racing with time has never been new with FIA. They have implemented the same in Formula E. It's also a part of the IndyCar and a few other series. So it was nothing new. But as said, like okay, if one driver goes fastest, then probably he increases the number of laps you can cover in
Correct.
17 minutes. So that becomes a variable which the teams have to deal with. And so the pit stop strategies, then the algorithms kick in. So yeah, it was new for a Formula One watch viewer, but yeah, it was an exciting new way to conduct a
Yeah.
race.
Speaking of excitement, I think what really played out is with this rain that came in, the tire strategy went for a toss and it worked for some, it didn't work for some. Obviously, uh, Bharath, I want to hear from your perspective, Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, comfortably leading in the first, I would say about 15 laps. And suddenly the whole thing went topsy-turvy, where next thing you know, Charles Leclerc is pitted twice and comes out fourth. Sainz comes out second. Perez is suddenly number one, and Verstappen is three. Like, what do you think happened? Like, why did Ferrari do what they did? And in hindsight, it looks really stupid, but what do you think? What were the reasons why they would have gone for the strategy that didn't really work out?
Um, as you guys know that the team Ferrari is going to investigate the team's principal call on this particular race. That's the article that I read around in various websites, and I will not call this as stupid. Sometimes team principal has to make a decision, uh, which which is better for the team drivers, the race drivers. But sometimes it doesn't work out, and
Yep.
sometimes some team may take advantage of that decision. And like I can say that if Ferrari team principal did not make that call. I know that Carlos, there is a big chance of Leclerc to finish as a winner of that race. But like I will not call that as stupid, but sometimes luck favors and sometimes luck doesn't favor. Um, yeah, overall,
I think
I
that
think
makes
that
sense. But I think probably the reason why that whole strategy came into play was with the whole rain and then the sort of the track drying up.
yeah.
They wanted to get into the inters, but Sainz actually called out and said, "I can hang out and go directly for the slicks." But they thought that looking at how Gasly wasn't performing, they figured that they might get into the inters. They got Charles Leclerc get the inters, and then right after realize that okay, this isn't really working out, so maybe we should switch to slicks. So Vignesh, from your perspective, is that the sequence of events that probably played out and that impacted Ferrari?
See, according to me, there was a disadvantage Ferrari because they were the leading car. And you see that okay, whenever there is a tricky condition and you want to make the strategic call, always the team which is in the first never takes it. This was the case with Lewis Hamilton in Hungary last year also. So being in the first always gives you a disadvantage. Second is somehow, as you said, like Ferrari were surprised by the pace of the inters, and they said, okay, that would be our go-to strategy. Now, why? Because they have seen a number of drivers going to the inters, and it was working out for them. For example, Gasly, his overtake on Sebastian Vettel and others was a perfectly executed one. The thing was that, okay, probably they might have timed it a bit too late, that, okay, when they were pitting for an enter, the track was considerably dry. So for the slicks to be effective, and that's where probably I feel they made a mistake. Otherwise, yeah, it was never going to be Ferrari's call to pit Leclerc from the on-go because he was the first car.
Makes sense. Obviously, Mick Schumacher unfortunately had a bad accident. At least if you look at the car, it feels like a terrible accident. Fortunately, nothing serious happened to him. He walked away and he's perfectly fine. But looking at the results, there's a huge question that comes up. Like in the last episode, we sort of discussed about who's number one driver for each of the cars that we have there, right? For Ferrari, for Red Bull, for Mercedes. If you look at the results so far in the season, it begs the question that I would like to hear your opinions about is, if you look at Mercedes as an example, Lewis Hamilton, multi-time champion, obvious choice to be driver number one. If you just look at performance for 2022, George Russell, across all teams, consistently the only driver to finish in the top five, right? So that's one point. If you get into Red Bull, for example, Checo won today. If you look at the previous race, Checo basically was asked to pull back. He had a chance, he could have won, but he was asked to pull back and he stayed with the team orders. He wasn't happy about it, but he stayed with that. So if you look at performance this year again, Checo potentially is doing as well as Max Verstappen if you exclude the team orders in play, and he could technically be driver number one, but that doesn't seem to be the case. If you look at Ferrari as an example, Leclerc is assumed to be driver number one, and performance-wise in the qualifying, he's been doing well. If you look at the results, Sainz came in up front. Maybe it was because of a strategy decision, but he drove well. And again, if you look at all the races so far, Sainz has been, to some extent, he's made mistakes. To some extent, he's been unlucky. But there's no clear distinction to say that Sainz should not be number one. So what are your thoughts in terms of what was the assumed order when we got into the season and the point that we have reached today? Are team orders playing out? Should they not be removed and these drivers given an opportunity to decide who they are number one and number two based on the race? Or is there a bigger game at play here? Vignesh, we could start with you.
Yeah, okay. So as you said, okay, every team has a number one and number two driver. It theoretically simplifies the entire management for a team. Now, considering that, okay, let's take the example of Monaco. Perez was ahead, then somehow Red Bull weren't able to find Max Verstappen second. If Max Verstappen was second, I am 100% confident that team orders would have been implemented. The reason why they couldn't was the science guy. Now, that is what made Perez go and win the race. So in that way, Red Bull have more often focused on Max because the simple fact is he's leading the world championship and he deserves, in the way that, okay, you focus your energy on him, considering that, okay, he's going to give you the fruits of the WDC. Same goes with Ferrari. Leclerc, although as you said, like Sainz was a bit unlucky. There were certain times he made a mistake, but then you also see that, okay, Leclerc is in the forefront of the World Driver Championship. So that's where your focus should go on. In case of Mercedes, it's a clear winner that, okay, you should stop focusing on Lewis because, okay, George is giving you the results. Agreed, Lewis is a seven-time world champion, but then, okay, you cannot go on the emotional game in a game or in a sport which is totally on stakes. So if Russell is performing and giving you the target, you should go for him. Same goes with probably with AlphaTauri you have Gasly, who is the clear driver number one. With Haas you have K-Mac. He has been always outperforming Mick Schumacher, so he would be the driver number one. For Alfa Romeo, you will have Bottas. The only team where I believe they don't have a driver number one and driver number two is Williams and Alpine, because there both the drivers are very close to each other. For Aston Martin, it's clearly Sebastian Vettel, considering he has been outperforming Stroll. So in that way, I believe, see, for me, just one simple word: if a driver gives you a WDC, focus on him and let the other driver put you as a helping hand and win you the Constructors' Championship.
So I'm going to And that makes sense from that perspective. I'm going to go to a Checo fan to see what does he think about this order.
Like Vignesh mentioned, the team always favors a title-winning contender, and the team always has a wingman too. But with respect to RB, our Checo had the first year to taken the first year to adjust to the car, and now he is very very familiar with this baby right now. And this year he has shown his true potential. Like you mentioned, Vivek, he was held back by team orders few times, but I don't think so that there is any number one or number two in RB anymore. It's gonna be Hamilton and Rosberg 2016 rivalry, like we saw in 2006. And I think it's gonna be
You mean Nico
in
Rosberg and
2000.
Hamilton, the rivalry?
Yes, 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 yeah. So I think so. It's gonna be like that, because if Checo wins one or two more races, he'll be closer to Max, and at that time, I don't think so. Horner's word will not have any impact, because even Checo, when he came in, he told that he wanted to be a world champion in this team. So that's what he told. That's what the statement he made. So I don't think so that this year it's gonna be like that, like previous years. But anyway, Horner will try to favor Max Verstappen, I believe, but still Checo to have a chance. With respect to Mercedes, even though George Russell can be very very consistent, but it's a time of luck. You know, last days Hamilton didn't do any mistake. He just had a contact from behind. So sometimes luck don't favor a person. So that's what happened with Hamilton. But still, Hamilton, may not score points and Russell may score points, but still Hamilton is number one in the series. So
But the only thing I would
I
highlight there is in a fair race with no team orders, I agree. Perez probably has a chance of winning one or two more races and coming closer. But as Vignesh highlighted, even in this race, because there's Sainz in between, they couldn't do the swap. But there would have been a high probability if these guys were 1-2, a swap would have happened, because your Max Verstappen is assumed, I mean, he's anyways leading at this point, and he's assumed to be the one who will get the WDC for Red Bull. And because for Red Bull, as long as both are 1-2, their constructors is taken care of. So they don't really care from that perspective of who comes in first or second. But the fact that the focus has been on Verstappen, and Vignesh brought in an interesting point earlier where I think in the contract clause or something, it's mentioned that Verstappen could potentially exit the team if he feels that he's not driver number one. And I'm sure that's Jos Verstappen doing his legalese there. But I think that could also be a big factor to why those team orders are coming into play. But interestingly, Checo has renewed his contract, like latest news that we all got, right? It's a single year contract. What do you think is playing out in his mind? Because if he's continuing in the current setup, he's going to be driver number 2. So is he not aiming to be WTC, DC, and he's just saying, I'm on one of the fastest cars on the track. Let me get some good enough points, a couple of wins, and that's good for me? Or do you think he's basically getting some miles and giving him some space so that when opportunities open up with the other players? Because if you look at it, right now it's become a 3-way race. Mercedes has picked up from the initial start. Ferrari is one of the fastest cars on the track, and you have Red Bull. So is he playing a waiting game to see where he can get a good opportunity? And that's why it's a 1-year contract. What are your thoughts around what is going through Checo's mind as he renewed this contract, where potentially he's going to be stuck as number 2?
See, the thing here is, let me be plain and frank. Sergio Perez doesn't need Red Bull. Red Bull needs Sergio Perez. So that's what the case is. What is happening here is they haven't had any best second driver for past, I think so, ever since Ricciardo left. They tried with Gasly, they tried with Albon, and they tried with, like one or two more drivers. But I think so that Perez is the best number 2, and Red Bull will not leave Perez to just leave. And I'm not surprised by the contract extension. Like you mentioned, Perez is 32. and still he has the dream of becoming a world champion. But in the current setup, I don't think so. Even he knows that it's not possible. Mm. I think what he is thinking is as long as he is getting some podiums under his belt is fine enough for him, is what he is thinking, is what I believe. But now he may go for a now WDC too. Who knows?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So
Vignesh, any thoughts on this, or in general, as we get into Azerbaijan in a few weeks' time? What are you looking forward to?
yeah. So considering that okay, he has got only a single year extension, also shows that okay, Perez has been a keen looker of the developments. Considering that okay, this is the first year with the new regulations, you never know okay how this pair of cars will look like. Probably like teams like McLaren might come into the forefront with a good amount of development and understanding of their car. And that's when 2024 becomes that crucial time when you have a lot of potential driver market free up. I think so. Lewis Hamilton is getting freed that time. George Russell has a contract till 2024. And in that way, the driver market is much more open than it would be closed in 2023. So that is one good thing which he did. He ensured that okay, his stability is there till 2024, and at 2024 when the market is open, he can take his chances. Probably yeah, go in other teams like McLaren. Probably Ferrari might release any driver, who knows, or Mercedes if they develop their car quickly. And so in that way, he also has a chance of WDC at in 2024 and onwards. Considering that, as said, my view is the chances of Perez having a WDC in Red Bull is slim. He is just there to ensure that okay, he remains alive because you know the sport. If for 1 year you're out of the sport, you're done and tested. So he wanted that to ensure that okay, he remains in the sport so that he gets a world driver championship winning car. And that's one thing which I really adore of Perez.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think we are on time from our discussion. Again, thanks a lot, both of you, for taking your time out and sharing your experiences and what are the strategies that could be playing out to what we are seeing on the front. We have a break for a bit before we get into Azerbaijan in June. So from that perspective, it'll be interesting to see what is happening behind the scenes as we get to that particular race. One thing we have noticed with Monaco also is that the race directors have been a lot more stricter about a lot of the rules. We had the weighing bridge scenario where Charles Leclerc went ahead, and then his the paddock team basically stopped him and pushed him back to make sure that he didn't get any penalties for that. A lot of teams got a lot of violations for getting off the track, and that was being highlighted time and again. So we are seeing that FIA through the race directors is being a lot more stricter about following all the rules. All the hula around the jewelry and the underwear has disappeared for now, but that was again something that highlighted that there is a lot more focus on rules and regulations. It'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out in Azerbaijan. But till then, thanks a lot once again. An exciting, enigmatic race that we had in Monaco, which has always been a major highlight, a lot of history around this race, and hence a lot of excitement that we had. The outcome was brilliant for the race itself to see, someone who's not the regular folks that we've seen win throughout, and have Checo, who's been a fan favorite across team lines. It's not just Red Bull fans, but if you talk to anyone who's a fan for any of the other teams, they'll always support Checo. So I think overall, F1 fans were super happy that Checo won and wishing that he gets to win a lot more purely on his racing skills, and team orders don't come into play. But we know that from a Red Bull's perspective, they've invested in one person to be the WTC, so they are going to play that. But fingers crossed as always, you never know how that plays out. Maybe Sainz can help Checo win a lot more races by being in between between Checo and Max wherever possible. Again, thanks a lot everyone for viewing the show. If you have comments on whatever we have said, put it down in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe to the Toast Network. We have the French Open being covered by our tennis, and we had an exciting IPL finale and we have a session based on that, part of our cricket. So a lot of things have happened from a sporting weekend standpoint, and that's one of the reasons why we delayed this particular show, because we know you'd all be exhausted with the various events that you were watching over the sporting weekend. So thanks a lot again to everyone, and looking forward to hearing and seeing all of you at our next episode. Once again, Vignesh, Bharath, thank you for being on the show.